Well, if you're expecting a sharp economic slowdown, you may be disappointed at the latest data. I'm Scott Ott, and this is Bill Whittle now.
It
and Bill,
sucks to be a Democrat
it's
these
rough.
days.
There's a story this week that that Americans filing first-time applications for jobless benefits in the states, these 56 states of the union, has hit a new 49.5-year low. This hasn't been this low. The new claims for unemployment haven't been this low since 1969. And Bill, of course, I'm sure that immediately raises the question, now that things are going so well in the economy, isn't this the time to pour it on
taxes
with the social benefits, with
Yes.
more decent housing, more health
Absolutely.
care for the poor, more welfare, and frankly, more money for the underfunded public school system?
Oh, well, I couldn't have put it better than myself, honestly. Oh, my God, where to start? Well, first of all, I think my first take is probably the closest to the truth. Economy improves, Americans are happier, country is flourishing and secure, Democrats hardest hit. This is as if another were needed. This is just another pin in the data plot for what cutting taxes does to the economy. This economy is not growing at this rate, and it's not. And these unemployment rates are not at historic lows because people like Donald Trump and decided they're going to go to work or look for work when I didn't before. It's got nothing to do with that. It's got nothing to do with it. We think that certainly the left thinks that it's all about the charisma, it's all about the this and that and the promises and so. No, it's not. The entire happiness of the country is founded on whether or not people are making enough money to feel comfortable or whether they're not. That's the entire root cause of despair in this country is either I don't have enough money, and that's unemployment, low employment, whatever. So stay with me on this. The happiness of the country, including the security of the country in terms of the tax revenues for the military, but the happiness of the country is dependent on whether or not people are feeling good and comfortable and feel like they've got a chance to make it to the end of the week. Donald Trump has no impact on that personally, and neither does anybody else. But the entire happiness of the country, therefore, is predicated on business owners, and specifically small business owners, because big businesses have the reserves to ride out just about anything. When small business owners are allowed to keep more of the money that their company generates, they are always inclined to spend it on things like a new truck, or if I have a restaurant, maybe I'll open a new location, or I'll open another dry cleaning store and maybe start a franchise. These things require money on the part of the small business owner, but once that money is available through lowered taxes, then that person has to employ people to man or woman this new outlet, this new piece of wealth that's been created. And that requires hiring people. And that means that more people are working. And when more people are working, more people are spending. I'm a very poor understanding of macroeconomics. I understand that you can't spend more money than you make over a long period of time. That one I pretty much got figured out. I wish some of the big brains had learned that. They must have been absent that day. But here's the little ghost of what I do understand. And that's an interesting concept called velocity. And velocity is how rapidly dollars are moving around. So if I have $1 and I hold on to it for a year, that's low velocity. But I have $1 and I decide, oh, look at that, it's a hot dog, I want to go buy that. And then that guy says, oh, look at prices. We should be talking about $10, obviously, but you get the idea, right? So the more that money changes hand, it's the same dollar bill, it's the same unit of currency, but the faster it goes around, the more benefits it brings to people.
Well, Bill, that sounds like the same argument that Nancy Pelosi was making when she was saying that we should pump $1 trillion of federal money into the economy because those dollars would get passed around at a high rate of speed.
No, she's wrong, as always. There's a difference between velocity and volume, right? If I have 10 chickens in a line and I scurry them along and those chickens are moving faster, that's increased velocity. If I have 10 chickens in the line and I add another 100 chickens and that makes the line slow down, That's decreased velocity, and I have to pay for the 90 chickens that I don't own.
Well, you've got to admit that there seems to be an almost mystical balance between the two major parties. I mean, unless you're one of those people who is willing to write off half the American population and say they're all stupid or evil, you've got to look at both sides and say, hey, maybe we ought to alternate our administrations in Washington between Republicans and Democrats. Republicans go in and create the atmosphere for economic
Republicans
growth, and then Democrats come in and spend the money on
the Republicans go in and make money and make people happy, and then the Democrats come in and take away people's money and make them miserable until it's time to elect a Republican again.
That's different people, Bill. That's different.
No,
people.
it's not. It's not. It's the same people, Scott. And I'm not saying that the people who are in favor of high taxes are evil or even stupid. I'm just saying they're misinformed. I ought to know. I was one of them. I was all about higher taxes when I was a lot more liberal in college, and the reason I was in favor of higher taxes was I wasn't paying any taxes. I didn't have to run a business then. I was signing the back of the checks and not the front of the checks, and there's a big difference in outlook. So to say that there's two sides to this story is just plain not true. There are many cases where you have a difference of opinion that is simply opinion. It's an artistic opinion. This is a great painting. No, it's a terrible painting. In that case, you can go back and forth about the relative merits. But there's simply no question about this. And I wish somebody would actually tell the story of the Great Depression factually, because everybody believes that FDR came along with these federal programs and saved the country, when in point of fact, they extended the Depression by probably 5 years. There's simply no question about it. And we wouldn't even be having this battle. In other words, the evidence of low tax rates, a booming economy, people being employed, people buying new cars, all of this, the benefit of that is so obvious that we would not have any discussion about this at all if it weren't for the way that the left has a stranglehold on information. The history of the Great Depression is a great example. But then what happens is they start to prey on people's sympathies. And I have no problem with people being sympathetic, but if somebody had the understanding, and I'm not talking about economics degree, I mean just the ability to add, Scott, what the Republican Party, we come back to the same thing again and again and again and again and again and again. They are incapable of drawing the moral conclusions from this philosophy. They only draw the economic conclusions. They'll point to the low unemployment numbers and say, see, and that doesn't mean anything. What means something is to say that Americans are happier because of this, and poor Americans are receiving more benefits when you lower taxes because the revenues in general become larger. And that's if you can just get that across to people, that prosperity is not just good for the rich, it's not just good for the middle class. A prosperous, growing economy is of the most value to the people who the Democrats play as the people who are most in need of higher taxes. It's very simple, really.
Doesn't this kind of prosperity, though, this kind of job growth, this kind of decline in the unemployment rate and GDP growth only make it worse for those people who are trapped at the bottom?
That's an absurd thing to say.
It's the inequality, Bill, isn't it?
It's the absurd thing to say. Who do you suppose could weather a financial storm, a rich person or a poor person? Who do you suppose could better do it? Or in other words, how do you think you would do better in the winter? A guy who has a fur coat factory or a guy who's got rags on his back? The people who suffer the most under slow economies are not the rich. They simply spend less. They simply spend less, and they live very comfortably. It's the poor that suffer under slow economies. It's the people who are trying to go out and get either minimum wage jobs or try to feed a family on a job or 2 jobs or maybe even 3 jobs. Those are the people who suffer when you raise taxes. And so let's just get clear about this. That's obvious. There's no question about it. Tax cuts are good for the rich, tax cuts are good for the middle class, and tax cuts are good for the poor, because a tax cut actually generates more revenue than a tax hike does. And if you don't understand the Laffer curve, I can explain it to you fairly simply by saying that if you have a very small pizza and you have a quarter of that pizza, and then you order a very, very large pizza, but you order a smaller slice of that large pizza, there's more actual pizza in the little thinner slice of the big pizza than there is in the fatter slice of the small pizza. Any idiot can see that. I can put it on a scale and weigh it. That's all there is to it. So the bigger that pie gets, the more money that is made available in each one of the wedges. And by keeping the wedges small, the economy grows even bigger. This is a fundamental economic truth. There's no question about it. Some people have never heard, most people have never heard it before. Because if you understood the Laffer curve, if you understood that lower taxes means more revenue for the government, then there'd be no Democratic Party.
Well, it seems to me, Bill, you've already acknowledged that you're no expert in macroeconomics and that you know that just one little action on the part of the chief executive of the country doesn't suddenly turn the country on a dime. So why are you...
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying it does turn the country on a dime. What I'm saying is that there's nothing political that turns the country on a dime. It's not about Donald Trump and it's not about his popularity. It's not about his poll numbers. It's not about anything. It's about his ability to wield a pen and pass a bill to lower the tax rate. That's the only thing that matters.
But this economic convoy of a nation, so to speak, is huge, and like most convoys, takes a long time to turn around. How are you so sure that this isn't just finally the coming to fruition of the stimulative policies of 8 years of President Obama?
Oh boy, Scotty, I don't have that kind of time in my life. Do you? Do you have the kind of time in your life to be so anchored to a failed philosophy that you're willing to wait 8 years for something that doesn't happen? This is another point about the economy and the recovery and the tax cut, is how quickly it reacts, not how slowly. It's how quickly it reacts. This is again prima facie evidence that it actually works. And to say that Donald Trump makes a tax cut and 6 months later the economy is rip roaring is the end result of something Barack Obama did 9 years earlier is just plain. It's stupid. It's
about
silly.
half the country is desperately trying to get back to those days, though, Bill.
About half the country
do you think they're all just absolutely wrong?
I do. I don't think they're stupid, and I don't think they're evil. I just think they're wrong. And I don't blame them for being wrong in the same way that I don't blame millennials for not knowing who fought on what side in World War II or what century it occurred in. It's not their fault. The fault lies with the people that are doing the educating, or in the case of the last 40 years, the uneducating. It's not just even miseducating, it's uneducating. It's not teaching facts that are inconvenient to their political worldview. And the political worldview that they like, Scott, really pretty simple, really. It's a worldview that elevates university professors to the lofty heights of the intelligentsia rather, and the nomenclatura, and gives them power that they wouldn't have otherwise by simply going out and opening a car dealership or something other vulgar thing like that would do a lot of people a lot of good.
Well, because Bill Whittle has now whipped out the 7-syllable words, I think it's time to draw this to a close before I get completely confused with intelligentsia and nomenclatura and all that kind of stuff. I didn't go to the kind of school that you did, apparently.
7 syllables over 5 words. I didn't go to the kind of school that I went to either.
Ladies and gentlemen, we appreciate your attention to these little conversations, and we want you to know that if you're watching this for free right now, it's because somebody didn't just sit back and watch for free. They stepped forward and made a contribution. And those people we call the members at BillWhittle.com. They joined up by going to BillWhittle.com and clicking that Become a Member link. They decided at what level they felt comfortable supporting this enterprise and just clicked the button, and they were off to the races, not only helping to distribute this content, but actually now on the new website creating content themselves. We are grateful for their contribution. So for Bill Whittle, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks to the members at BillWhittle.com for making this happen.